Good evening. Please stand. Please stand and join me singing Send the Light 595. There's a call comes ringing o'er the restless wave. Send the light, send the light. There are souls to rescue, there are souls to save. Send the light, send the light, send the light, the blessed gospel light, let it shine from shore to shore. Send the oh, weary in the work of love, send the light, send the light. Let us gather jewels for a crown above. Send the light, send the light, send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine from shore to shore. Send the light, the blessed gospel light. Let it shine forevermore. Brother Kelly, would you open us in prayer?
Father, we're just so thankful that we've been united and just praise you for the freedom we have to come and to worship you, Lord. We pray tonight that you would be with our association, Lord, as they go make decisions that affect us and others. Pray, Lord, you would guide them with these decisions they make as they fulfill your will. Lord, we just thank you for Deb sharing part of your devotional on this morning. Lord, praise you for that, Lord. As Brother JD stands before us tonight, Lord, we pray for your anointing to teach your word. Give us a heart to listen, understand, and apply it to life. And we praise and honor you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Be seated. Let's continue singing. We have heard the joyful sound. We have heard the joyful sound. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Spread the tidings all around. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Bear the news through every land. Climb the steeps and cross the waves. Onward is the Lord's command. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Give the winds a mighty voice. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Let the nations now rejoice. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Shout salvation full and free. Highest hills and deepest caves. This our song of victory. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Hymn 573, Set My Soul Afire. Set my soul afire, Lord, for thy holy word. Burn it deep within me, let thy voice be heard. Millions grope in darkness in this day and hour. Dwayne, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Amen. Well, you might see something odd up here. Listen, I'm not Doug. I don't sing as well as Doug. I don't pretend to. These young men want to perform, and I told them I'd stand in. So what I'm going to tell you is the louder you sing, the less you hear me. That will be your goal and your reward. All right, take it away, Maestro. Okay. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise, treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there is nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, and there's nothing better than you. There is nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn dancing morning to dancing. You give beauty to ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Amen. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Listen, don't hold that against these guys. They work hard, and hey, I enjoyed it, and I know you didn't. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you guys. Good job, brother.
You were a bad singer.
It's not nice to lie in church, boys. Well, as you can see, I'm not a musician, nor am I a singer. I do dearly love to sing praise songs. I'm not good at it. So I prefer to do it from down there where you guys don't have to hear me quite as much. That's why I sit in the front, believe it or not, so I can sing as loud as I want, and only Jill and Cherry have to endure it. And Jonathan sits in front of me. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Just a few announcements before we get started. Penny stole my watch, so I guess I'll just preach till I fall out. Preach until I fall out, and you should have told her not to steal my watch. A few announcements. Falls Creek payoff thermometer. We're going to try to get it set up over here somewhere where everybody can see it. That's pretty awesome. 7,500 and some change already. Less than a month in, right? So that's awesome, guys. You guys are so generous, and I'm so proud to be part of a generous church. So just be praying about how God would have you to give to that, or have you to help with that, whether it be for prayer or in financial support, or in support in some other way. If you've got interesting ideas, let us know. We'd love to hear about it. So that's awesome, and I appreciate that. We're going to keep plugging along at that until it's paid for, and then we won't have to worry about another balloon payment, re-up, whatever we had to do this. I don't know how all that stuff works. So anyways, we won't have to worry about it next time. I have confidence that we will be finished with it long before that. Fifth Sunday Sing coming up next Sunday, one of my favorite times. Really, because like I said, I enjoy singing praise songs. I enjoy singing hymns, but from down there, not from up here. And as you guys just witnessed why that is. And I do want to, can you guys just give JJ and Jack a round of applause right quick, please? Thank you. I appreciate those young men. Believe it or not, it's not the easiest thing to do to get up on a stage in front of people. Never thought I would be standing in front of people on a stage. And I appreciate you guys. You've done awesome on learning that song. I can't wait for the next one. I'll even sing it with you if you want. If you want me to. Also, remember our Sunday school time. If you're not part of a Sunday school class, please take the opportunity to make yourself part of a Sunday school class. That's one of my favorite times in church. It's close fellowship time and a really enjoyable time. I get to hang out with some rambunctious teenagers, and I really enjoy that, and I hope you enjoy your Sunday school class as well. Also, we have a 9 a.m. prayer meeting. Every Sunday morning, 9 a.m., we do a prayer for the services and for those of us that are out sick or for whatever reason. And by the way, I do covet your prayers and appreciate your prayers that were given for me as I was ill last week. Another round of applause for Kelly and Betty. 60 years. Listen, I don't even know how to live for 60 years yet, much less be married for 60 years. So that's a pretty awesome milestone. And I love Kelly and Betty very much. Appreciate all the things that they do for the youth and the other ministries of the church. I guess we have quite a few out for the associational meeting, or a few out for the associational meeting, and a few out for illness or traveling or whatever. Please be in prayer for those individuals. We have a cottage prayer meeting, I believe, not this coming week, but the week after. Do we know where that's at? At Lee and Dwayne's. Cottage prayer meeting, Lee and Dwayne's, Thursday the 2nd. Is that it? 2nd? And at 10 p.m.? 7 p.m. Sorry, Dwayne said that's past his bedtime, so. 7 p.m. At Dwayne and Lee's. If you haven't come to a cottage prayer meeting, I would implore you to come to a cottage prayer meeting. I haven't made it to all of them, but the ones I have made it to have been really awesome, and I enjoyed very much. So if you haven't made it to one, please do your best to make it to that. And then directly after service tonight, we will have a youth-focused prayer meeting, as is our custom. Now, we're going to get into, wait a minute. Why do chicken coops only have 2 doors? Because if they had 4 doors, it'd be a sedan. That was funny, Danica. You don't have to get it, just laugh. Look, Penny told me that I need to do lunges to stay in shape. I said, well, that would be a big step forward. Acts chapter 12. Save us, Word of God. Acts chapter 12. Looking at Acts chapter 12, verses 6 through 11 in a message entitled, God Comes Through in a Pinch. Doesn't he, though? Doesn't God, he comes through, right when you just think this is the end of the deal, I'm out. And God seems to have a way of coming through in a pinch. And as I read this passage, now don't get me wrong, there's a lot in this passage that I could preach about, a lot that a lot smarter preachers could preach about. But I just want to take an overview and look at some of the interesting things that I picked up out of this as I was kind of studying through this passage. And it was interesting because I've read this passage a lot of times and it's never came at me like this. So this is what God put on my heart. You remember last time we saw that sometimes really things aren't all that peachy for the followers of God. What happened to James, the brother of John, in our last message? Off with his head, right? He didn't make it. And then what happened to Peter? Yeah, he got locked up. Peter got locked up. So we looked at the fact that sometimes things aren't always so peachy for followers of God. But tonight we're going to see that God also will come through in a pinch when it's His will to do so and when it's necessary for Him to do so. So looking at chapter 12, verses 6 through 11, we're going to pick it up there, and I've got a few short points. Oh, and by the way, I'm sorry there are no notes on the back of the bulletin. I'm going to use this excuse because I have it. I was sick last week, and I didn't get finished with this message until Friday. And I didn't get the notes emailed to Lee until after she'd already done the bulletin. So I apologize. That's my fault. And I will endeavor to do better in the future. But that's why there are no notes on the back of your bulletin today. It came in handy because I could write my notes for the announcements on the back of my bulletin this evening. That was another attempt at a joke, guys. Verse 6, my pericope says, Peter is rescued. Now, when Herod was about to bring him out on that very night, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and sentries before the door were guarding the prison. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood next to him, and a light shone in the cell. And he struck Peter on the side and woke him, saying, Get up quickly. And the chains fell off his hands. And an angel said to him, Dress yourself and put on your sandals. And he did so. And he said to him, Wrap your cloak around you and follow me. And he went out and followed him. And he did not know what was being done by the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. And then when they had passed the first and second guard, they came to an iron gate leading into the city. It opened for them of its own accord. And they went out and went along the street. And immediately the angel left him. And when Peter came to himself, he said, Now I'm sure that the Lord has sent His angel and rescued me from the hands of Herod and from all of the Jewish people, and from all that the Jewish people were expecting. May God add understanding and application to His word this evening. As I read this passage, I think about the situation Peter was in. Now listen, it says in the first verse of this passage, Now when Herod was about to bring him out. What was Herod's purpose for bringing Peter out? He's going to suffer the same fate as James, the brother of John, right? He was going to suffer the same fate as James. that was so. When you read that passage, if you don't have all of the background in mind, you might think that he was just going to get set free, and this angel just came along and got him out like a few minutes early. But that's not what happened. Peter was in dire need of rescuing at this point. Anybody ever been there? In dire need of rescuing? I have. God seems to show up right when there's no other place to turn. So we look at this passage. These first couple of verses show us that when time was running out, God stepped in. When time was running out for Peter, God sent his messenger and did what God does. God made a way for his plan to be fulfilled. Now, did the messenger of God come to Peter and compel him to do anything? Did he make Peter do anything? No. No, he didn't. Which is interesting. God has the power to run us like marionettes if he wants to. But he doesn't. He doesn't. You see, God has a plan for each and every one of us, and it's a beautiful mosaic that lays out our life, and we can look behind us, and as Doug said this morning, that Jesus' blood has washed away our past, and our past, we're free from our past because of that, but in a lot of people's cases, your past is part of what led you up to where you're at, and it gives you a beautiful testimony to speak to what Christ has done in your life. So while you are, yes, free from the past that enslaved you, that doesn't mean you ought to forget the past that you had to learn from. See, Peter was sitting here in prison with his feet tied, I'm sure in stocks like they would have in that day, probably tired, wiped out, and asleep. And just when all hope was gone, Peter was helped. I don't know about you. How long would you have to sit in a damp, dreary, moldy prison cell with your feet chained up before you decided it was enough? How long? It wouldn't be long. Listen, I'm not proud of this, but I've sat in a jail cell before. And I'm going to tell you right now, it took me all of 45 seconds to decide I didn't want to sit there anymore. And then I didn't ever want to go back in there if I ever got out of there again. And listen, this wasn't any little damp, dark, moldy corner. This was like a modern prison cell, had a few amenities in it at least. Peter didn't have it easy. And I'm not positive how long he'd been arrested, but it'd been for a few days at least. He'd been sitting in here for a few days as Herod decides to come out and behead him, and all hope was gone. You see, God is often around waiting until the end to give us what we need. Why do you think God does that? Because that's how long it takes us to turn to him so often, right? Like all the way to the end, and we're feeling like, oh yeah, God's over there, and He can help me out of this. You see, do you think that's more for God's timing? Because by my estimation, I think that gives us an opportunity to strengthen our faith. We need to exercise our faith, right? Like, how do you get stronger? How do you get stronger, JJ? You keep pushing, right? You don't ever stop. You keep going. Lift weights. That's how you get strong. How do you exercise your faith? How do you exercise your faith? You got to put feet to it. That's right, Dwayne. You got to push it, right? You got to push your faith to the edge and say, I trust you, God. I trust you, God. Oh, I trust you, God. All the way. And that's what Peter did. He trusted God all the way. As a matter of fact, as we look at this next thing that came up, that came out of this, I really see a lot of faith in Peter. You see, we never give up on faith in God because He's got your back. Peter found that out. You see, God's always there for us. Even if the results of our situation is not what we wanted, and Doug said that this morning, all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose. That means if we are where we're supposed to be in our relationship with God, then whatever we're facing is 100% for our good and God's glory. That's from the Scriptures. It doesn't matter what situation you're in. Listen, what you're facing or what you're going through, if your relationship is where it's supposed to be with God, it's 100% for your good and for God's glory. Every time. And we need to be okay with that. We need to be okay with that because God is the ruler of our lives. The Lord is the director of our purpose, not us. We don't get to decide when and what we go through. God does. And listen, it took me a long time to get this, and I'm still trying to get it, but we don't even have to understand why God puts us where we are. We just need to trust that He did and that He's there with us. And that's what Peter did as he was in this prison cell. He was asleep, right? Isn't that what the passage said? He was asleep. Listen, again, not something I'm proud of, and I hope none of you have ever experienced this, but I spent the night in a jail cell. I didn't do no sleeping. I was not comfortable with my situation. I was not happy with where I was at, and I wasn't at peace with God. But Peter was. Why? Why? You see, another thing that stood out to me about these first few verses, as I thought about my faith, and I thought about the struggles that I've had in my life, and I thought about what I've gone through, and I thought, faith is really easy to maintain when you're okay with God's plan, regardless. Listen, regardless of what God's plan is, when you're okay with it, faith is really easy to maintain. And what I picked up, what I saw in this picture of Peter in jail is Peter was not in a good spot. Peter could not have been happy about the spot that he was in. He wasn't comfortable where he was at. But you know what? He was okay with it because he was in the middle of God's plan. Peter was so sure he was in pursuit of God's will for his life that he knew he was right where God wanted him to be. And while it's not where he wanted to be, he was okay with it because that's where God wanted him to be. When we realize that, listen, our plans are fleeting and our plans lack vision, and we can finally trust that God's plan, whatever it is going to work out for the best in our lives, that means, listen, that we're okay with whatever God does with us. Church, ask yourself the question tonight. Are you okay with whatever God does with you? We got a bunch of young people sitting right back here in the corner. Young people, you got a whole life to live ahead of you. Are you okay with whatever God wants to do with your life? Because listen, those questions are going to come up and they're going to come at you fast, and you need to be ready with an answer. And that answer is yes. God, I'm okay with whatever you want me to do with my life. We need to be okay with it, listen, church, because God ordained it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to enjoy it. Although I think if you're in the middle of God's will for your life, you'll start to enjoy it pretty quickly. And you don't have to agree with it. All you have to do is follow it. Peter was right where God wanted him to be. Listen, why did God let Peter go to prison? Maybe to test his faith. Any other answers? To show us his faith, to test our faith. I don't know why he sent him to prison. What are you looking at me for? I don't know. But he did. And Peter was so sure that he was in God's will that he knew that's where God wanted him. You see, the second point that I pulled out of this passage is that the angel showed up and Peter did what he said. I think about that. I think about that. And it's pretty simple, right? It's pretty simple logistically to think about the fact that the angel showed up and Peter did what he said. But how often do we just do what God says when he says it? Well, let's pray about that. Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to get back to you. Let me check my calendar. My all-controlling calendar that has all those important things written on it. Way more important than what God has for me. I've got to look at my calendar. Or let me check if I've got time for that, because I've got so much time allocated to this, that, and the other. But you see, Peter was pretty wide open in this situation, wasn't he? So the angel shows up and Peter obeyed. And listen, where I came from this first point that Peter was secure in his faith is that, listen, Peter had to be sound asleep, because the passage says when the angel came in, the light shone around him, right? You ever been asleep and a bright light shines around you? What do? You turn over. Get out of here. You pull the covers up. You wake up, right? I know, because when I get up to work out in the morning, my wife tells me, you have to have that light on. You know why? Probably. Because it's a disturbance of your sleep, right? But the passage doesn't say Peter woke up whenever the light shone around him. Dude was resting, like he had those melatonin that KK took the other day. He was resting, right? He was like out. Because what it said was the angel was like, ah, wake up! And that's what I see in my mind. Like, I see this angel with all this light karate chopping Peter in the ribs. Get up, boy! Why did he have to karate chop Peter to wake him up? Because he was rested. He was okay with where he was at. Have you ever been in like a creepy hotel or somewhere where you had to stay and like you just had to stay there? Did you sleep really sound? No, why? Because you was scared. You was scared, like you was afraid something was going to crawl in your ear in the night, or something, right? Peter wasn't worried about any of that. As a matter of fact, he was so unworried, he was sleeping so hard, when they turned all this 10 trillion candle power light from the angel next to him, he was like, ooh, that's warm. And he just snuggled in deeper. And the dude had to karate chop him to wake him up. It's really evident that Peter was okay with God's plan in this situation. He was sleeping so peacefully, he got like a liver punch. It took something to get him up. Listen, I know some teenagers that sleep like that. Like you could drive a bulldozer through the house, and if you didn't hit their room, they would still be asleep. Right? You been there? That's how Peter was sleeping. Why do teenagers sleep that sound, by the way? Listen, it's because they got nothing to worry about. That's why. It's because they got nothing to worry about. Think about it. Did you sleep a lot when you were a teenager? If your parents let you? Yeah, because your parents took care of you. And you didn't have anything to worry about. Well, Peter didn't have anything to worry about because he knew that God was taking care of him. You see, Peter was sleeping soundly, knowing he was in the center of God's will for his life. And the angel wakes him up. And what did Peter do? He's like, all right, I'm up. What's up? How's it going, man? I'm up. So Peter gets up. The angel wakes him up, and then the chains fall off. But listen here. Peter was still a slave. How was that? The chains fall off of Peter, but listen, the Roman guard that put him in prison weren't who he was a slave to. See, Peter lived his life as a slave to Christ. So no matter what happens to him in this life, his status never changes. And he's always the same. That's why he can fall asleep so sound and be peaceful, because he knows his status rests in the mightiest power in the universe, and nothing else can change it. Nothing can change that. When you're a slave to Christ, then nothing that this world can throw at you has any lasting effect on you. Not even death has any lasting effect on a slave to Christ. Because we've got eternity to be exactly the same position that we are today. A son or a daughter of God. Yeah, there's nothing better than you. Nothing is better than you, Lord. So he was a slave to Christ, knowing that the messenger was from God. Peter didn't question his orders. He got up. He obeyed. He's even walking in delirium. Maybe the delirium made him more complacent. I don't know. Maybe that's why God waited till he was asleep, because Peter was an argumentative type person. Maybe he just didn't want the argument from Peter because there was some urgency. But Peter's obedience indicated that he knew who he was serving, right? He gets up and listens to the angel. And then another interesting little tidbit, as he was obedient to the angel, I picked up out of here. And I don't know why. There's a lot of symbolism in this passage, but just for simplicity's sake, the angel walked him through getting dressed before he left. He's like, yo, Peter, get up, put your sandals on. All right, I put my sandals on. Yo, Peter, put your cloak on. Okay, I put my cloak on. Why did the angel walk Peter through getting dressed? Okay, could have been he was in a state of delirium. Yeah, I can agree with that. There's also a lot of symbolism that comes with those garments that we could talk about for on and on and on. But you know what a simple-minded person like me sees in that passage? He was still asleep, maybe. But no, he'd woken up because he got karate chopped or liver punched or something. You know what I see there? God cares about every little thing. Every detail of our lives is known by God, and he cares about all of it. Obedience in the small things, church, leads to obedience in large things. Obedience in the small thing leads to obedience in the large thing. Let that sink in for a minute. Oh, this one little thing God won't care about. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Oh, I can do it just this one time. No, you can't. God gave us this picture. Peter woken up out of a dead sleep in prison. God gives us this picture of Peter waking up. And then God walks Peter through getting dressed. Something that everybody here, I'm sure, could do out of rote memory without ever opening their eyes. God cares about the details of our lives. So don't let something happen to you and think, oh, that's no big deal. God doesn't care about that. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. He cares about every single part of our lives. So the chains fell off. Peter get up. He gets dressed, and he listens to what the angel has to say. What's the angel tell him to do? Yo, come on, follow me. Peter's like, all right, I'm on your 6. We're out. Walking past, Peter's like, what's going on here? Like, what? The guards, they're just going to let us, all right, we're going to go. And then they come up to the city gate, and the city gates just open up. And he's like, did you open that? All right, let's go in. We're going in. Here we go, we're going in. And they're walking down the street, and Peter's still in this delirium. And you know what I think? You know what thought crossed my mind? We'll get there in a minute. It took a while, the third point that I have tonight. It took a while, but Peter finally figured out what was happening. You see, Peter's a bit thick-skulled, but he finally got to the point. I can relate. Peter's a bit thick-skulled. He finally got to the point. I'm not sure if it was the delirium or the fact that Peter had already come to terms with his fate. Listen, did Peter know what Herod was going to do to him? Yeah. Did Peter have some time to think about what was going to happen to him? Yeah. You see, here's what I think. It took him a minute to figure out that God rescued him, didn't it? He thought he was dreaming that God was rescuing him, right? He thought it was all a dream maybe for a moment. As he walked through all these steps. Like, I don't know about you, but if I'm thinking it's a dream, I'm like pinching myself or something. Like, is this a dream? Like, what's going on? But Peter didn't. Peter was obedient. He followed the angel of the Lord. He followed the messenger, did exactly what he said. And he finally figured it out. See, sometimes, listen, church, get this, listen closely. Sometimes God's already rescued us before we even know what's happening. You ever been there? You ever look back and say, oh, I see now. God got me out of that deal. Like here I was thinking I figured it out, and no, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. Thank God that he comes through in a pinch. See, when God works, it can be difficult for us to keep up. But like Peter, we should all catch up in the end. Shouldn't we? Like when God's moving in your life, sometimes it feels so fast and so rapid, it's difficult to keep up with God. Listen, God thinks on a level that we can't even comprehend. Listen, here's what I think. I think Peter just assumed that the angel was there to comfort him during the execution. I think that as Peter walked out with that angel, he thought he was going to be beheaded. And he was like, thanks for coming, bro. I appreciate it. I'm glad that you came along. Something good for me to focus on during this time of despair. Were you there for James too? But when it all played out, Peter was free. You see, I think back to the stoning of Stephen. And what did Stephen do while they were pelting him with rocks that were large enough to kill him? Jesus standing next to God. Whack, 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 whack. And he says, Jesus, they don't know what they're doing. Forgive them. As they're killing him. How do you do that? With the comfort of God. When you've got something so good to focus on that nothing else matters. I think that's where Peter was at. I think Peter thought this was his comforter come to rescue him from the pain of execution, to give him something good to focus on. And then so the angel splits, and Peter's like, oh, snap. Whoa, where's the guillotine? They didn't have those, did they? They just had like a dull axe and a log, right? Peter was like, wow, God really saved me right now. Like he took me out of the frying pan and he did not put me in the fire. Like I'm free. You ever been so relieved that you can't believe what happened has happened? Isn't that a wonderful place to be? That's where Peter was at. You see, Peter didn't understand what was going on, did he? Everybody go like this way. No, he didn't understand what was going on until the angel left. And listen, church, we don't have to understand what God is doing for it to be for our good. Took me a long time to come to that conclusion. It's still hard for me to accept because I'm a person that likes to understand and know how things work and why things do things the way they do things. I like to understand how things work. But Peter didn't, and it was for Peter's good. And we'll see in this next passage that it's also for God's glory. But it's for Peter's good that he rescued him out of prison from being executed. See, God's will for us is to live, and listen to this, church, listen to this. Somebody needs to hear this. To live an abundant life full of His blessing. His blessings. And I want somebody to hear this tonight. The only thing that stands in the way of that fate is us. The only thing that stands in the way of living an abundant life full of God's blessing is our hard-headed. God wants us to have it. The scriptures say He wants us to have it. And listen, He has the ability to give it. All we need do is follow Him. When the angel says, get up, get up. When the angel says, get dressed, get dressed. And when the angel says, come on, come on. That means we've got to be ready. We've got to be willing. That means our modus operandi ought to be pursuit of God. Now, we have other things we have to do, right? No. Everything we have to do ought to be in pursuit of God. Whether it be work. Do we have to work? Yeah. All of you at some point in your life have worked. You're either retired or working right now. Do we have to work? Yeah, we've got to work. But we can work for the glory of God. To the glory of God. And we can use the positions that He puts us in to pursue God. Do we have to take care of our families? Yeah. But listen, we can take care of our families in a way that's glorifying and in pursuit of God. So it's a trick question. Do we have other things to do? No. All we got to do is glorify God. Everything else is just the noise that comes in. Everything else is just the avenue by which we glorify God, which we pursue God. We don't have to understand what God is doing for it to be good for us. And I can tell you, I myself have been in enough situations that I did not understand that God was working good for me. And I'll promise you at the time, I wouldn't have thought it in a million years. And you've probably been in the same situation. So as we close tonight, just a few thoughts as we finish. As we think about Peter sitting in prison and his time running out, remember that God works on a different scale of time than us. And patience really is key for us. I thank God that He gave me a wife with a whole lot of patience, because I have to borrow a lot from her from time to time. I have none. But patience is key. Listen, this is beyond our realm of capability to understand, but God lives outside of time. Time has no effect on God. I know that's right, blow your mind stuff. So when we think time is running out, think again. God works on a different scale than you and I. And right now, today, we need to resolve to be obedient. Listen, so even if we're delirious, we can still act correctly. How did Peter act the right way in his delirium? Because he had already resolved that was what he was going to do. It was like rote memory for him. It didn't matter what God asked of him, he was going to give it. All the way to his head. It didn't matter what God asked, he was already going to give it. We need to resolve that obedience is our modus operandi toward God. And remember, God is patient with us, and He doesn't expect us to understand what He's doing. We just need to appreciate it when we finally get it. Appreciate what God gives you. Appreciate how God rescues you. Appreciate the fact that God has never forgotten you, and He'll never leave you, and He'll never forsake you. Appreciate the fact that Jesus says, I hold mine in my hand. And my hand is my Father's hand, and nobody can take you out of my Father's hand. Nobody. Not the devil, not your friends, not the government. Nobody can take you out of my Father's hand. Jesus said, if you're mine, you're mine. Period. End of story. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. He's the one that has the power to do anything and everything with your life. Will you let Him? I love you all so much. Thank you for the opportunity to stand before you once again. I apologize for the auditory violence that occurred earlier, and hopefully Doug will be here. To stand in this spot for those two young men in the future. Remember, Cottage Prayer Meeting the 2nd. Remember also that we have a Fifth Sunday Sing coming up next week. One of my favorite times. Really enjoy that. Hope that you'll be here for that. Remember also we're going to have prayer meeting directly following this service for the youth. And we will be closed with